The November rain fell in sheets across the cracked asphalt of the Seattle VA parking lot, turning the world into a blur of gray and cold. Marcus Reid stood beneath the narrow overhang outside the counseling center, watching water pool in the potholes, listening to the rhythm that reminded him too much of monsoon season in Kandahar. His duffel bag sat at his feet, everything he owned compressed into 40 pounds of fabric and fading memories. Beside him, a German Shepherd mix named Sable pressed against his leg, her warmth the only thing keeping the November chill from settling too deep into his bones. She was scarred along her left flank, graying around the muzzle, limping slightly on her rear leg from the IED blast that had ended both their deployments 3 years ago. They'd survived together, healed together, as much as either of them could heal. Marcus reached down, threading his fingers through the coarse fur at Sable's neck. "Just you and me, girl," he whispered. "Like always." The dog's tail thumped once against the concrete, a small sound swallowed by the rain. Inside his jacket pocket, a letter crinkled against his ribs. He'd read it so many times the creases threatened to tear through the paper entirely. The words were burned into his memory now, etched there like shrapnel. "Mr. Reid, we regret to inform you that your uncle, Robert Callahan, passed away on October 3rd. As his only living relative, you are named as sole beneficiary of his estate. Please contact our office at your earliest convenience." Uncle Robert, a man Marcus had met exactly twice in his life, both times before he turned 8. A ghost of a relative who sent birthday cards with $20 bills until Marcus turned 18, then vanished entirely into whatever life he'd built in the mountains of Montana. And now he was dead, leaving Marcus an estate that probably consisted of unpaid bills and a house collapsing under its own weight. The rain intensified, drumming harder against the overhang. Sable shifted closer, her nose pressed to Marcus's knee, sensing the tightness in his breathing that preceded the panic attacks. She'd learned to read him better than any therapist ever had. "I'm okay," Marcus murmured, though the tremor in his voice betrayed him. "Just thinking." A car pulled into the lot, headlights cutting through the downpour. Marcus watched it park, watched a man in a suit step out under an umbrella, watched him hurry toward the building entrance. Someone with somewhere to be. Someone with a purpose. Marcus had neither. He'd been discharged honorably, medically retired with a Purple Heart and enough shrapnel still lodged in his back to set off metal detectors. The VA had given him a place to stay for 60 days while he transitioned to civilian life. Those 60 days ended yesterday. This morning, he'd packed his duffel, clipped Sable's leash, and walked out into a world that didn't need broken soldiers or broken dogs. The letter in his pocket felt heavier with each passing minute. He pulled it out again, unfolding it carefully, reading the address at the bottom. Hastings and Mercer Law Firm, Whitefish, Montana. Montana, 1,500 miles from here. 1,500 miles from the last place he'd called anything close to home. Sable nudged his hand, whining softly. "Yeah," Marcus said, looking down at her. "I know. We don't have much choice, do we?" He had $340 to his name. His truck had died 2 months ago, sold for scrap to pay for Sable's emergency vet visit when an infection nearly took her. Bus fare to Montana would consume most of what he had left, leaving him barely enough to eat for a week. But staying here meant sleeping under bridges, meant watching Sable go hungry, meant another winter on the streets that might finally break what little remained of both of them. Marcus folded the letter, tucked it back into his jacket, and shouldered his duffel. "Come on, girl. Let's see what Uncle Robert left us." Sable stood, shaking water from her coat, tail wagging with cautious optimism. She trusted him completely, even when he didn't trust himself. They walked through the rain toward the bus station 6 blocks away, Marcus's boots splashing through puddles, Sable keeping pace despite her limp. The city loomed around them, indifferent and cold, its lights reflected in the wet pavement like distant stars. At the station, Marcus bought 2 tickets, one for him, one for Sable as a registered service dog, and watched his savings shrink to $180. The bus didn't leave until morning. They'd spend the night on a bench in the terminal, huddled together against the fluorescent chill. Sable curled at his feet, head resting on his boots, eyes half closed but never fully asleep. Always watching, always ready. Marcus leaned back against the hard plastic, closing his eyes, trying not to think about what waited in Montana. trying not to hope for anything more than four walls and a roof that didn't leak. But somewhere deep in his chest, beneath the scar tissue and the weight of 3 tours overseas, something stirred. Something fragile and dangerous. Hope. The Greyhound bus groaned through the mountain passes, its engine straining against the steep grades as the landscape shifted from rainy lowlands to frost-covered peaks. Marcus pressed his forehead against the cold window, watching pine trees blur into dark green walls that stretched endlessly upward. Sable slept in the narrow space at his feet, her breathing steady, occasionally twitching as dreams pulled her back to places neither of them could escape. 43 hours on the road. 2 transfers. One night spent sleeping upright while teenagers blasted music through cheap headphones, and a crying baby filled the silence between stops. Marcus didn't sleep much anyway. Hadn't slept well since Helmand Province, since the night the convoy hit the IED, and he'd woken up in a field hospital with Sable whimpering beside him, her legs shattered, his back full of metal. Now, as the bus descended into the Flathead Valley, the mountains opened like cathedral walls around a river that cut silver through the November landscape. The sign at the city limits read Whitefish, Montana, population 7,800. Marcus's throat tightened. This was it. The place Uncle Robert had called home for 40 years. The place Marcus had inherited without ever asking for it. The bus hissed to a stop outside a small station that looked more like a gas station with delusions of grandeur. Marcus gathered his duffel, clipped Sable's leash, and stepped into air so cold it burned his lungs. The temperature had dropped 30 degrees since Seattle, and he didn't have a coat thick enough for this kind of winter. Sable shivered beside him, pressing close. "I know," Marcus muttered. "We'll figure it out." The address on the lawyer's letter led him 3 blocks down a main street lined with ski shops and breweries, places that catered to tourists with money to burn. Marcus walked past them all, Sable limping beside him, drawing stares from people who looked like they'd never missed a meal in their lives. Hastings and Mercer occupied a narrow brick building wedged between a coffee shop and a real estate office. Marcus pushed through the door, grateful for the blast of warmth that greeted him. A receptionist looked up from her desk, her smile professional but strained when she took in his worn jacket and the dog at his side. "Can I help you?" "Marcus Reid," he said quietly. "I have an appointment with Mr. Hastings. About my uncle's estate." Her expression shifted, softening slightly. "Of course. Please, have a seat. He'll be right with you." Marcus lowered himself into a leather chair that probably cost more than everything he owned. Sable sat at attention beside him, watchful, her ears tracking every sound in the building. 5 minutes later, a door opened, and a man in his 60s stepped out, gray-haired and sharp-eyed, wearing a suit that fit too well to be off the rack. "Mr. Reid? I'm Edward Hastings. Thank you for coming all this way." They shook hands. Hastings's grip was firm but brief, his gaze lingering on Sable with the kind of recognition that suggested he'd seen service dogs before. "Please, come into my office." The office smelled of leather and old books. A massive desk dominated the space, its surface covered in neat stacks of folders and documents. Hastings gestured to a chair across from him, then settled into his own seat with a soft exhale. "I'm very sorry for your loss," Hastings began. "Your uncle was a good man. Private, but good." Marcus nodded, unsure what to say. He'd barely known the man. Hastings opened a thick folder, scanning the contents. "Robert Callahan's estate is straightforward in some ways, complicated in others." He looked up. "You're his only living relative, which makes you the sole beneficiary. However, there are conditions." Marcus's stomach tightened. Of course there were conditions. Your uncle owned a piece of property in the Boulder River Valley, about 40 miles north of here. 80 acres, most of it forested. On that property sits a barn. Just a barn. No house. No utilities. No road access beyond an old logging trail. Marcus frowned. "That's it. A barn. That's it." Hastings slid a photograph across the desk. It showed a weathered structure half hidden by pine trees, its red paint faded to rust brown, its roof sagging on one side. "Your uncle lived in town, worked as a mechanic. But he visited that property every month for 40 years. Never sold it, never developed it, never told anyone why." "Why?" Marcus asked. "That," Hastings said slowly, "is the question he wanted you to answer." He produced a sealed envelope from the folder, yellowed with age, Marcus's name written across the front in shaky handwriting. He left this for you, with explicit instructions that it only be opened by you, and only after you'd reached the property. Marcus took the envelope, feeling its weight, the slight bulge of something metallic inside. Hastings continued, the property taxes are paid through the end of next year. After that, it's yours to keep or sell as you see fit. But your uncle was very clear. You must visit the property first. See it with your own eyes before making any decisions. Marcus turned the envelope over in his hands. Did he say why? No. But in the 40 years I handled his affairs, Robert Callahan never did anything without a reason. Hastings leaned forward slightly. Whatever's out there, he believed you needed to find it. Sable shifted at Marcus's feet, her nose pressing against his knee, grounding him. How do I get there? Marcus asked. Hastings pulled out a map, circling a location in red ink. The logging trail starts here, off Highway 83. Four-wheel drive is recommended, but the trail's passable on foot if necessary. It's about a 2-hour hike from the highway. Marcus looked at the map, at the empty spaces between roads, at the distance he'd have to cross with everything he owned on his back, and a dog who could barely walk a mile without pain. There's one more thing, Hastings added quietly. He slid a business card across the desk. A man came by last month asking about Robert's property. Claimed to be interested in buying it sight unseen. Offered well above market value for raw land. Who? Wouldn't give a name. Just left this. The card was blank except for a phone number. When I told him the property wasn't for sale until the estate was settled, he became insistent. A chill ran down Marcus's spine. Insistent how? He suggested it would be in everyone's best interest if the property changed hands quickly and quietly. Hastings met his eyes. I thought you should know. Marcus pocketed the card and the envelope. Thank you. Hastings stood, extending his hand again. If you need anything, legal advice, assistance with the property, don't hesitate to call. Your uncle was a client for a long time. I'd like to honor his wishes. Marcus shook his hand, then gathered Sable's leash. They stepped back into the cold Montana afternoon, the mountains looming in every direction, the weight of mystery pressing down like the sky itself. Sable looked up at him, tail wagging uncertainly. Yeah, Marcus said softly. I don't like it either. But they had nowhere else to go. No other options. No plan B. He looked at the envelope in his hand, at the bulge that suggested a key. Whatever Uncle Robert had hidden in that barn, someone else wanted it badly enough to make threats. And Marcus Reid, homeless veteran with a broken dog and $180 to his name, was about to walk straight into the middle of it. Marcus spent that first night in Whitefish huddled in the doorway of a closed sporting goods store, Sable curled tight against him, both of them shivering despite the shared warmth. The temperature dropped to 18 degrees, and frost crept across the glass storefront like ghostly fingers. He didn't sleep, couldn't risk it with Sable's breathing growing shallow from the cold. By dawn, his decision was made. He used $30 to buy a winter coat from a thrift store, too big in the shoulders, too short in the sleeves, but thick enough to matter. Another $15 went to dog food and a cheap sleeping bag. That left him with $135 and no way to rent a car, even if he'd wanted to risk it. Walking it was. He caught a ride north on Highway 83 with a logger heading to his shift, a man who didn't ask questions and didn't talk much, just let Marcus and Sable sit in the warm cab while classic country played low on the radio. The logger dropped them at a dirt turnoff marked only by a faded orange ribbon tied to a fence post. Trail's back there, the logger said, pointing into the trees. Gets rough about a mile in. Watch for deadfall. Thanks, Marcus said. The truck rumbled away, leaving them alone in a silence so complete it felt like pressure against his eardrums. Marcus adjusted his duffel, checked Sable's paw wraps, makeshift protection he'd fashioned from old bandanas, and started walking. The logging trail was barely visible, overgrown with huckleberry bushes and pine saplings that scratched against his legs. The ground was frozen hard, every step crunching loud enough to make him flinch. Old instincts, always listening for the sound that didn't belong, the shift in the air that preceded danger. Sable moved ahead, her nose working the ground despite her limp, ears swiveling with each bird call and branch crack. She'd been trained as a patrol dog, skilled at detection, at sensing threats before they materialized. Even now, broken as she was, those instincts ran deep. An hour in, the trail narrowed, choked by fallen trees that Marcus had to climb over, dragging his duffel behind him. Sable struggled with the obstacles, whimpering when her bad leg caught on bark, but she never stopped. Never quit. That's my girl, Marcus murmured each time she cleared a log. Just a little further. But a little further stretched into another hour, then another. The forest grew darker, the canopy thickening overhead until only fragments of gray sky showed through. The temperature dropped as they climbed higher into the mountains, and Marcus's breath came in ragged clouds. His back ached where the shrapnel sat embedded against his spine, old pain flaring with the cold and exertion. He pushed through it, focused on the rhythm of walking, on putting one boot in front of the other. Then Sable stopped. She stood rigid in the center of the trail, hackles raised, a low growl rumbling from her chest. Marcus froze, scanning the trees. What is it? The dog's ears pinned forward, focused on something ahead, something Marcus couldn't see. He dropped his duffel, moving slowly, quietly, the way he'd been trained. Every sense heightened. The forest was too quiet now. No birds, no wind, just the thud of his own heartbeat in his ears. Then he saw it. Fresh tire tracks in the mud, cutting across the trail, maybe 50 yards ahead. Recent. Within the last few hours. Someone else had been here. Sable growled again, deeper this time, protective. Marcus knelt beside her, running a hand along her neck. Easy. We're okay. But they weren't okay, and they both knew it. He studied the tracks. Heavy tread, deep impressions. A truck, probably four-wheel drive, and whoever drove it had come up this trail within the last day. The barn was supposed to be abandoned, untouched for months since Uncle Robert's death. So who the hell was out here? Marcus considered turning back, but turning back meant sleeping under another bridge, meant another winter killing them slowly. He'd survived worse than a nosy stranger. Survived firefights and ambushes and nights when he'd been sure the sun wouldn't rise again. Come on, he whispered to Sable. Stay close. They moved forward, slower now, Marcus's eyes scanning constantly, his body tensed and ready. The trail curved around a granite outcropping, then descended into a narrow valley where the trees thinned and patches of frost-covered meadow appeared between the pines. And there, at the far end of the valley, stood the barn. It looked exactly like the photograph, only sadder. The roof sagged worse than the picture suggested, and several boards had fallen away from the walls, leaving gaps like missing teeth. But it was still standing, still solid enough to offer shelter. And parked beside it sat a black Ford F-250, mud-splattered and idling. Marcus's pulse spiked. He grabbed Sable's collar, pulling her behind a cluster of boulders at the valley's edge. They waited, watching. After 5 minutes, the barn door creaked open. A man stepped out, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing an expensive jacket that didn't belong in these woods. He looked around the clearing with the careful attention of someone searching for witnesses, then pulled out his phone. The wind shifted, carrying fragments of the man's voice across the valley. Nobody here. Place is a wreck. Yeah, I'm sure. No sign he's been here yet. Marcus's jaw tightened. The man ended the call, climbed into his truck, and drove back up the trail, the engine fading into the distance. Sable's growl subsided, but her body remained tense. Marcus waited another 20 minutes, making sure the man was really gone, before emerging from cover. They approached the barn slowly, Sable sniffing every inch of ground, checking for threats. The barn door hung open, swaying slightly in the breeze. Marcus pushed it wider, wincing at the loud creak of old hinges. Inside, the air smelled of wood rot and motor oil. Dusty light filtered through gaps in the roof, illuminating a space mostly empty except for a rusted tractor in one corner, a workbench covered in forgotten tools, and a ladder leading up to a loft. Sable circled the interior, nose to the ground, her tail stiff with concentration. Marcus pulled the envelope from his jacket, breaking the seal his uncle had placed 40 years ago. Inside was a single key, brass, old-fashioned, attached to a metal tag stamped with 3 words, Loft, northwest corner. And beneath the key, a note in Robert Callahan's handwriting. Marcus, if you're reading this, you came. Good. What I've hidden here is yours by right, though you never knew it. Your mother, my sister, made me promise never to tell you where it came from. She wanted you to have a normal life, free from the weight of this secret. But she's gone now, and so am I, and you deserve the truth. The key opens a floor panel in the loft. What you find there will change everything. But be careful. Men have died protecting this, and others will kill to take it. Trust your instincts. Trust your dog. And whatever you do, don't let them know you found it until you're ready. Uncle Robert. Marcus read the note twice, his hands trembling slightly. Sable barked once, sharp and urgent, her attention fixed on the loft ladder. Yeah, Marcus whispered. I see it. He climbed slowly, each rung groaning under his weight. The loft was dark, cramped, filled with old hay bales and cobwebs. But in the northwest corner, just as the note promised, a section of floorboards sat slightly raised. Marcus knelt, brushing away decades of dust. The board had been cut precisely, fitted back into place so carefully that you'd never notice it unless you knew where to look. He inserted the key into a small brass lock hidden beneath a layer of dirt. The lock clicked. Marcus lifted the board, and the world stopped. Beneath the floorboard, packed into a space no larger than a coffin, sat stacks upon stacks of gold bars. Each one stamped with markings Marcus recognized from his military training. U.S. Treasury. 1969. His breath caught. His vision blurred. There had to be hundreds of them. Maybe more. Sable whimpered from below, sensing his shock. Marcus reached down with shaking hands and lifted one bar. It was heavier than he expected, solid and cold, real in a way that made his heart hammer against his ribs. Beside the gold lay a leather journal, its pages yellow with age. Marcus opened it, scanning the first entry. May 14th, 1969. We did it. Got the shipment out before the base was overrun. Colonel said to hide it until things settled. Said we'd be heroes. But heroes don't steal $255 million in gold mint for the South Vietnamese government. Heroes don't abandon their posts and disappear into the jungle. God forgive us. Marcus's stomach turned. The journal continued, entry after entry, detailing how a small unit, including Robert Callahan, had diverted a gold shipment during the chaos of the Vietnam War, smuggling it back to the States piece by piece over the course of a year, hiding it in equipment crates, body bags, anything that wouldn't be searched. Most of the unit died within 10 years. Some from guilt. Some from men sent to silence them. I'm the last one left. And I've kept it hidden, waiting for the right person. Waiting for family. Waiting for you, Marcus. This gold was stolen, yes. But it was stolen from a government that collapsed, from a cause that failed. It belongs to no one now. Except you. Do with it what you think is right. Just survive long enough to make that choice. Marcus closed the journal, his mind reeling. $255 million. Hidden in a barn in Montana. Blood money from a war that ended before he was born. And someone already knew it was here. Sable barked again, frantic this time. Marcus scrambled down the ladder just as the barn door slammed open. 3 men stepped inside, all of them armed. The first man, the one from earlier, smiled coldly. Thought you'd show up eventually, Reid. Thanks for saving us the trouble of searching. Marcus raised his hand slowly, positioning himself between the men and Sable, who snarled low and dangerous. Easy, the man said, his gun never wavering. We're not here to hurt you. We're here to make a deal. Marcus's voice came out steady despite the adrenaline flooding his system. What kind of deal? The kind where you walk away breathing, the man said. And we take what doesn't belong to you anyway. Sable lunged. Everything happened at once. The closest man swung his weapon toward the dog. Marcus moved on pure instinct, tackling him before he could fire. They crashed into the workbench, tools scattering, wood splintering. Sable clamped her jaws around the second man's arm, dragging him down with a strength that belied her injuries. The third man raised his gun. A shot exploded through the barn, deafening, echoing off the rafters. Marcus felt the bullet pass inches from his head, heard it punch through the wall behind him. He grabbed a wrench from the scattered tools and swung hard, connecting with the first man's temple. The man dropped, unconscious before he hit the ground. The second man threw Sable off, scrambling backward, clutching his bleeding arm. The third man aimed again. Sable launched herself at him, 70 pounds of fury and loyalty, hitting him square in the chest. They went down together, the gun skittering across the floor. Marcus dove for it, his fingers closing around cold metal just as the second man rushed him. They grappled in the dirt and hay, Marcus's injured back screaming with every movement, but he didn't let go. Couldn't let go. He brought the gun up hard, slamming it against the man's jaw. The man's grip loosened. Marcus shoved him away and stood, breathing hard, the weapon steady in his hands. The second man raised his hands, eyes wide. Okay, we're done. The third man groaned beneath Sable, who stood over him with her teeth bared, blood flecking her muzzle. Call her off, the man whimpered. Sable, here. The dog backed away slowly, never taking her eyes off the threat, positioning herself at Marcus's side. Who sent you? Marcus demanded, his voice cold. The second man shook his head. We don't know names. Just a number. They called, said there was gold up here, said to secure it before some homeless vet showed up. How did they know? Don't know. Don't care. We're just contractors. Marcus's jaw tightened. Contractors. Mercenaries. Which meant whoever wanted this gold had resources, connections, reach. Get out, Marcus said quietly. Take your friend. And if I see any of you again, I won't hesitate. The men scrambled to gather their unconscious companion, dragging him toward the door, blood trailing behind them. This isn't over, the second man muttered. I know, Marcus said. They disappeared into the forest, leaving Marcus and Sable alone in the wreckage of the barn. Sable limped to his side, pressing her head against his leg, trembling slightly. Marcus sank to his knees, wrapping his arms around her. Good girl. You saved me again. She licked his face, tail wagging weakly. But as Marcus looked up at the loft, at the fortune hidden in the floorboards, he knew the truth. This wasn't over. It was just beginning. And whoever wanted Robert Callahan's secret badly enough to send armed men wouldn't stop until they had it. Or until Marcus was dead. The barn fell silent except for the ragged sound of Marcus's breathing and Sable's soft whimpers. The dust from the fight hung in the air like gun smoke, caught in the beams of late afternoon light streaming through the bullet hole in the wall. Marcus forced himself to stand, his back sending sharp jolts of pain through his spine. He moved to the barn door, scanning the tree line, listening for engines or footsteps. Nothing yet. But they'd be back, or someone worse would come. He had maybe an hour. 2 at most. Sable limped to the workbench, nosing through the scattered tools until she found what she was looking for, a canvas tarp folded beneath a pile of oily rags. She grabbed it in her teeth and dragged it toward Marcus, tail wagging despite her exhaustion. Smart girl, Marcus murmured, taking the tarp from her. He climbed back to the loft, moving faster now, urgency overriding pain. The gold bars gleamed in the dim light, stacked with military precision, 40 years undisturbed, waiting. Marcus counted quickly, 60 bars visible on the top layer. He lifted one, checking beneath. Another layer. And beneath that, another. His hands moved methodically, pulling bars up, examining the space. 3 layers deep, 20 bars per layer, 3 separate stacks. 180 gold bars. At roughly 400 ounces per bar, at current prices somewhere north of $2,000 per ounce. His mind struggled with the math, overwhelmed by zeros that didn't feel real. $255 million. Just like Uncle Robert's journal said. Enough money to change 1,000 lives. Enough to kill 4. Marcus wrapped 8 bars in the canvas tarp, all he could safely carry without breaking his back. He tucked the journal into his jacket, then carefully replaced the floorboard, scattering dirt and hay over it to hide any sign of disturbance. If they came back, they'd search. But maybe, just maybe, they wouldn't look hard enough. He descended the ladder with the tarp slung over his shoulder, the weight incredible, each step a test of will. Sable watched him with worried eyes, sensing his strain. I know, Marcus said through gritted teeth. I know it's heavy. He moved to the barn's rear wall, where a small door he'd noticed earlier led to an old root cellar. The door stuck, swollen with moisture and time, but Marcus forced it open, revealing stone steps descending into darkness. The cellar was maybe 8 feet square, carved from granite, its walls weeping with condensation. Marcus lowered the tarp carefully into the far corner, covering it with rotted burlap sacks he found scattered around. Not perfect, but better than leaving it in plain sight. Sable barked sharply from above. Marcus's pulse spiked. He scrambled up the steps, emerging into the barn just as the sound of engines reached his ears. 2 trucks this time. Coming fast. Damn it, Marcus whispered. He slammed the cellar door shut, kicked dirt over the threshold, then grabbed his duffel. Sable, come. They ran. Out the barn side entrance, into the forest, branches whipping at Marcus's face as they crashed through undergrowth. Sable stayed close despite her limp, her breathing harsh but steady. Behind them, truck doors slammed. Voices shouted. Marcus veered west, away from the logging trail, into terrain he didn't know, driven by pure survival instinct. The forest grew denser, the ground steeper, his lungs burning with the altitude and exertion. A gunshot cracked through the trees. Marcus dropped flat, dragging Sable down with him. The bullet struck a pine trunk 10 feet to his left, bark exploding in a shower of splinters. He couldn't fight. Not against multiple armed men. Not in the open. They scrambled behind a granite outcropping, pressing into the stone as footsteps crunched closer. "We know you're out here, Reid," a voice called. Not the men from earlier. This voice was older, colder, practiced. "Might as well make this easy on yourself." Marcus's hand found Sable's collar, holding her silent. The dog trembled with the urge to attack, to protect, but she held position. The footsteps came closer, then stopped. "Radio says storm's moving in," another voice said. "We keep looking. We might not make it back out before dark." A pause. Then the first voice, sharp with frustration. "Fine. Fall back to the trucks. We'll set up a perimeter, wait him out. He's got nowhere to go." The footsteps retreated. Marcus waited until the engines started again, until the sound faded into the distance. Only then did he allow himself to breathe. Sable licked his face, whining softly. "I know," Marcus whispered, stroking her head. "I know you want to fight. But we can't. Not yet." The sky had darkened while they hid, clouds rolling in heavy and gray. The temperature dropped fast, winter reasserting itself. Marcus checked his surroundings. They were maybe 2 miles from the barn, in terrain he didn't recognize, with no clear trail back. Night was coming, and with it, snow. He found a shallow overhang, barely a cave, just a depression in the rock face deep enough to offer shelter from the wind. He spread his sleeping bag inside, ushering Sable in first. The dog curled tight, making herself small, leaving room for Marcus. He crawled in beside her, their combined body heat the only thing between them and hypothermia. As darkness fell, snow began to fall with it. Soft at first, then heavier, blanketing the forest in white silence. Marcus pulled out Uncle Robert's journal, using his phone's dying battery to read by its pale light. July 3rd, 1969. Collins is dead. They found him in his apartment, made it look like suicide. But I know better. Someone's cleaning house. Someone doesn't want this gold resurfacing. We were supposed to be patriots, saving assets from falling into enemy hands. Now we're just thieves running from other thieves. Marcus turned the page. August 12th, 1969. Made it to Montana. Bought land with cash, no questions asked. Buried the gold in a barn I built with my own hands. No one knows. No one can know. The Army declared the shipment lost in the fall of Saigon. Officially, it never existed. Which means officially, we never stole it. Another page. March 4th, 1970. Henderson died yesterday. Car accident, they said. That's 3 of us gone in 8 months. I'm next. I can feel it. But I've got a plan. My sister's pregnant. If I can survive long enough, if I can keep quiet long enough, maybe her child will inherit what we died protecting. Maybe some good can come from all this blood. Marcus's phone screen dimmed, battery at 2%. He closed the journal, plunging them into darkness. Beside him, Sable's breathing slowed, deepened. Despite everything, she slept. Marcus couldn't. His mind raced through impossible calculations. How to move the gold without being tracked. How to convert it to cash without triggering federal alerts. How to survive long enough to make any of it matter. And beneath all those questions, one truth he couldn't escape. His uncle had kept this secret for 40 years, watching his friends die one by one, never spending a single ounce of the fortune. Because spending it meant dying. Outside, the snow fell heavier, covering their tracks, sealing them into the mountain like a tomb. Marcus pulled Sable closer, feeling her warmth, her trust, her absolute faith that he would find a way through this. He'd survived 3 tours in Afghanistan. Survived IED blasts and firefights and nights when he'd been certain the sun wouldn't rise. He could survive this. He had to, because Sable was counting on him. And somewhere in that barn, beneath rotting floorboards, lay enough gold to save them both. Or destroy them trying. Dawn broke, gray and muted. the snow having fallen all night until the forest transformed into something unrecognizable. Marcus woke to Sable's nose pressed against his face, her breath warm in the freezing air. His body ached from sleeping on stone, his back screaming where shrapnel pressed against nerve endings. But he was alive. They crawled out of the overhang into a world buried under 8 inches of fresh powder. The temperature had dropped into the teens, and Marcus's breath came in thick clouds that dissipated slowly in the still air. Sable shook snow from her coat, limping worse than yesterday. The cold had settled into her old injury, making every step painful. "Easy, girl," Marcus said, kneeling to check her leg. The muscles were tight, inflamed. She needed rest, warmth, proper care. Instead, she had this. Marcus oriented himself using the sun's position, calculating that the highway lay roughly southeast. But between them and civilization stood the men who wanted him dead, the gold he couldn't abandon, and miles of wilderness that would kill them just as efficiently as a bullet. He made a decision. They'd circle back to the barn. Not directly. Through the forest, approaching from the north where the terrain was steeper and less likely to be watched. If the men were waiting, they'd be watching the obvious approaches. Marcus hoped. The hike took 3 hours. Every 100 yards, Marcus stopped, listened, scanned for movement. Sable stayed alert despite her pain, her nose working constantly, checking for human scent on the wind. When they finally emerged at the ridge overlooking the valley, Marcus's stomach sank. Both trucks were still there, parked beside the barn. Smoke rose from a small campfire. They dug in, prepared to wait. But as Marcus watched through a gap in the pines, something shifted. The men gathered at the trucks, talking in a tight cluster. Then, abruptly, they began loading gear. One of them gestured angrily toward the barn, clearly frustrated. 5 minutes later, both trucks started up and rolled back toward the logging trail, leaving the valley empty. Marcus didn't move, didn't trust it. He waited an hour, watching for any sign of a trap, any indication they'd left someone behind. Nothing. Finally, as the sun climbed toward noon, he descended with Sable into the valley. The barn stood exactly as he'd left it, door hanging open, bullet holes still visible in the wall. Marcus approached carefully, every sense heightened. Inside, the space had been thoroughly searched. The workbench overturned, tools scattered, hay bales torn apart. They'd been looking, but not in the right place. The loft ladder had been pulled down, boards pried up at random. But the northwest corner remained undisturbed, hidden beneath enough debris that casual searching missed it. Marcus checked the root cellar. The tarp with the 8 gold bars sat untouched beneath the burlap sacks. He exhaled slowly, relief washing through him. But relief didn't solve his problem. He couldn't stay here, couldn't move the gold alone, couldn't sell it without documentation, provenance, some way to legitimize $255 million in stolen government assets. Sable whimpered, drawing his attention. She stood at the barn entrance, staring down the valley toward the logging trail. Her hackles weren't raised, but her posture was alert, focused. Marcus followed her gaze. A single figure walked up the trail. Not hurrying, not sneaking. Just walking with the steady purpose of someone who knew exactly where they were going. Marcus's hand went to the gun he'd taken yesterday, tucked into his waistband. The figure drew closer. A woman, maybe 50, wearing practical hiking gear and carrying a leather satchel. She stopped at the edge of the clearing, hands visible, empty. "Marcus Reid," she called out. Her voice carried clearly in the cold air. Marcus stepped into the doorway but didn't lower the gun. "Who's asking?" "My name is Catherine Wells. I'm a federal investigator with the Defense Criminal Investigative Service." She reached slowly into her jacket, producing a badge that glinted in the sunlight. "I need to talk to you about Robert Callahan and what he left behind." Marcus's jaw tightened. "I don't know what you're talking about." Catherine smiled faintly. "Yes, you do. And so do the men who were here yesterday. And so do at least 3 other parties who've been tracking this gold for 40 years. She took a careful step forward. "Can I approach? I'm not armed, and I'm not here to arrest you." Sable growled low. "Why should I believe you?" Marcus asked. "Because if I wanted you dead, you'd be dead. And if I wanted the gold seized, I'd have brought a tactical team." She gestured to the empty valley. "I came alone because I'm hoping we can help each other." Marcus considered. Every instinct screamed not to trust her. But every instinct had also been screaming since he opened that floor panel, and he was running out of options. "Stop there," he said when she was 20 feet away. Talk from there. Catherine nodded, setting her satchel on the ground. Robert Callahan was part of a unit that diverted $255 million in gold during the fall of Saigon. The official story is that the gold was lost in the chaos. The real story is that 6 soldiers smuggled it home, planning to return it to the government once the political situation stabilized. Doesn't sound like they returned it, Marcus said. Because they couldn't. Within 2 years, 4 of them were dead. The army denies the gold ever existed, which means acknowledging the theft would implicate high-ranking officers who approved the original shipment. So instead, they've spent 40 years letting private contractors hunt for it, cleaning up loose ends, keeping everything off the books. Why? Because the moment that gold surfaces, questions get asked. Congressional hearings, court-martials, criminal investigations into who authorized what. Catherine's expression hardened. Easier to let it stay buried. Easier to kill anyone who tries to bring it into the light. Marcus absorbed this, his mind racing. So what do you want? I want justice. I want the men who murdered Robert Callahan's unit held accountable. And I need evidence to make that happen. She met his eyes. The journal. Robert kept records, didn't he? Names, dates, orders. Marcus said nothing. Catherine continued. I can offer you protection. Witness relocation, full immunity, even a finder's fee from the government. But only if you cooperate. And the gold goes back to the treasury, where it belongs. Sable growled again, deeper this time. Marcus looked down at her, then back at Catherine. I need time to think. You don't have time, Catherine said urgently. Those men yesterday? They work for a private security firm called Sentinel Solutions. They're funded by a consortium of retired officers who know exactly what this gold represents. Their careers, their pensions, their reputations. They'll burn this entire valley to keep it buried. Then why haven't they? Because they don't know exactly where it is. They're searching, but so far, you've stayed ahead of them. She paused. That won't last. They're bringing in more people. Better people. By tomorrow night, this place will be crawling with mercenaries. Marcus's stomach twisted. What happens to me if I hand over everything? Really? Catherine's expression softened. You get to live. You get to start over. And maybe, just maybe, you help bring down the people who've been killing veterans for 40 years to protect a secret that should never have existed. The wind picked up, rattling the barn's loose boards. Marcus thought about the 8 bars in the cellar. Thought about the 172 still hidden in the loft. Thought about the $135 in his pocket and the dog limping beside him. Thought about Uncle Robert, spending 40 years looking over his shoulder, dying alone with a secret that had already killed everyone he served with. I need 24 hours, Marcus said finally. Catherine shook her head. I can give you 12. After that, I can't guarantee your safety. 12 hours to do what? To make a choice. The gold, or your life. She picked up her satchel. I'll be at the Whitefish Inn, room 14. You decide what matters more. She turned and walked back down the trail, disappearing into the forest. Marcus stood in the barn doorway long after she was gone. Sable pressed against his leg, both of them staring at the mountains that held them trapped. What do you think, girl? He whispered. Sable looked up at him with eyes that had seen too much, survived too much, trusted too much. And Marcus realized the truth. He'd already made his choice. He just had to figure out how to survive it. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the barn floor as Marcus worked with methodical precision. Sable lay near the entrance, her head resting on her paws, watching him with patient, knowing eyes. Every so often her ears would twitch, tracking distant sounds. Birds settling for evening, wind through pines, the faint creak of settling timber. Marcus had 12 hours before Catherine Wells expected an answer. But he'd spent 3 tours in Afghanistan learning that the enemy's timeline was never your friend. He climbed to the loft one more time, removed the false floorboard, and stared down at the remaining gold. 172 bars of history, blood, and consequences. His phone, down to 15% battery, captured photos of everything. The gold, the journal entries, the serial numbers stamped on each bar. Documentation, evidence, insurance. Then he carefully selected 4 more bars, wrapping them in canvas from his sleeping bag. With the 8 already hidden in the cellar, that gave him 12. Roughly $20 million worth. Enough to disappear, if he was smart. Enough to die for, if he wasn't. He replaced the floorboard, scattered debris, made it look untouched. The remaining 168 bars would stay hidden until he decided what to do with them, if he lived that long. Descending the ladder, Marcus gathered the 12 wrapped bars from the cellar and loaded them into his duffel. The weight was incredible, nearly 100 pounds of gold compressed into a bag designed for clothes and gear. The canvas strained, seams threatening to tear, but it held. Sable stood as he approached, tail wagging uncertainly. She knew something was happening, knew the air had changed, grown tighter with purpose. "We're leaving," Marcus told her softly. "But first, we need to see someone." The walk back to the highway took 2 hours, Marcus's shoulders screaming under the duffel's weight, his back sending jolts of white-hot pain through his spine with every step. He stopped frequently, breathing through clenched teeth, forcing himself onward. Sable stayed close, her limp pronounced now, but she never complained, never slowed unless he did. When they finally reached the highway, twilight was settling over the mountains. Marcus stuck out his thumb, and after 20 minutes, a ranch truck pulled over. The driver, a weathered man in his 60s, took one look at Marcus's military bearing and Sable's service dog vest and jerked his head toward the truck bed. "Heading into Whitefish," the man said. "That work." "Perfect," Marcus replied. He loaded the duffel carefully, then helped Sable up before climbing in himself. The truck rumbled back onto the highway, and Marcus watched the forest disappear behind them, wondering if he'd ever see that barn again, wondering if he wanted to. The Whitefish Inn sat on the edge of town, a modest 2-story building with a parking lot half full of out-of-state plates. Marcus thanked the rancher, shouldered his duffel with a grunt, and walked into the lobby. The clerk looked up from her computer. "Help you?" "Catherine Wells. Room 14. The clerk's expression shifted slightly, a tell Marcus recognized from years of reading faces in hostile territory. She knew the name, had been expecting someone to ask for it. "I'll call up," she said carefully. 2 minutes later, Catherine appeared at the top of the stairs. She wore jeans and a sweater now, looking less like a federal investigator and more like a college professor on vacation. But her eyes were sharp, assessing. "Mr. Reid," she said, "I didn't expect you until morning. Plans changed." She gestured toward the stairs. "Come up. We should talk privately." Marcus followed her to room 14, Sable limping beside him. Inside, the room was spartanly furnished but clean. A laptop set open on the desk, multiple windows displaying documents Marcus couldn't read from the doorway. Catherine closed the door behind them. "You've made a decision. I have questions first." She nodded. "Fair enough." Marcus set the duffel down carefully, and even through canvas, the weight made an audible thud. Catherine's gaze flicked to it, then back to his face. "If I give you the journal, the photos, everything you need to build your case," Marcus began, "what happens to the gold?" "It's seized as evidence, transferred to federal custody, eventually returned to the Treasury. And me? Witness protection if you want it. Immunity from prosecution. A stipend to help you start over." She paused. "It's not a fortune, Marcus, but it's a life. What about the people who killed my uncle's unit? The officers who've been covering this up?" Catherine's expression hardened. "I can't promise convictions. These men have powerful connections, expensive lawyers. But I can promise exposure. Congressional hearings. Media attention. The kind of scrutiny that ends careers and destroys legacies." Marcus absorbed this. "Not enough. It's what I can offer within the law. Then we have a problem." Marcus unzipped the duffel slightly, just enough for Catherine to see the glint of gold inside. "Because I've got 20 million reasons to take my chances outside the law." Catherine's face went pale. "You can't be serious. I've been homeless for 6 months. Slept under bridges. Watched my dog go hungry because I couldn't afford food for both of us." Marcus's voice was quiet, steady. "You're asking me to give up financial security for the rest of my life in exchange for exposure and a government stipend. I'm asking you to do the right thing. The right thing got my uncle killed, got his friends killed. The right thing leaves me with nothing while the men responsible retire with pensions and benefits." Marcus shook his head. "I'm done doing the right thing just because someone with a badge tells me to." Catherine stood slowly. "If you run with that gold, you'll spend the rest of your life looking over your shoulder. You'll never be safe, never be free." "I'm not free now." They stared at each other, the weight of impossible choices pressing down like the mountains outside. Finally, Catherine spoke. "What do you want, Marcus?" "I want justice for my uncle. I want the men responsible held accountable. And I want enough money to disappear and never worry about where my next meal is coming from. He met her eyes. Can you give me that? Catherine was silent for a long moment. Then she moved to her laptop, typing rapidly. There's a possibility. Unofficial. Highly irregular. I'm listening. The gold is technically U.S. property, but it was stolen during wartime under circumstances the government refuses to acknowledge, which means there's no official record of its existence. She pulled up a document on screen. If we document the recovery, file the paperwork correctly, and the right people sign off, there's precedent for a finder's fee of up to 15% of recovered assets. Marcus's breath caught. 15% of $255 million. Roughly $38 million. Minus taxes. Catherine turned to face him. But that requires full cooperation. The journal, the photos, testimony, everything. And it requires the gold to be officially recovered, which means bringing in people I trust, but who will ask very hard questions. Questions like where the rest of it is. Because I'm guessing what's in that duffel isn't everything. Marcus said nothing. Catherine smiled faintly. Smart. Keep your leverage. She closed the laptop. Here's my offer. You give me enough to build a case. 12 bars. The journal, photos, documentation. I file the recovery paperwork, arrange the finder's fee through official channels. You cooperate with the investigation, testify if needed. And the rest stays wherever you've hidden it. Insurance policy. If anything happens to you, if the deal falls through, if my superiors decide to screw you over. She shrugged. You've still got options. Marcus studied her face, searching for deception, for the angle. Why would you agree to this? Because I've been chasing this case for 8 years. I've watched good people die because powerful men wanted to protect their secrets. And if helping one homeless veteran get rich is what it takes to bring them down. Catherine's expression hardened. Then, that's a trade I'm willing to make. Sable lifted her head, looking from Marcus to Catherine and back again. Reading the tension, the trust being built on fragile foundation. Marcus made his decision. 12 bars, he said. The journal. Photos. Full cooperation. But the finder's fee goes through before I testify to anything beyond what's already documented. Catherine extended her hand. Deal. They shook. And somewhere in the mountains, beneath rotting floorboards in a forgotten barn, 168 gold bars waited in the darkness. Waiting for the day Marcus Reid decided whether to claim them or let them stay buried forever. The next 72 hours moved with the strange, dreamlike quality of a life shifting on its axis. Catherine made calls from her hotel room, speaking in careful code to people whose names Marcus never learned. Documents were drafted, signed, scanned, and sent through encrypted channels to offices in Washington, D.C. that operated in the shadows between legitimate government and something darker. Marcus stayed in the room next to Catherine's, Sable curled at his feet, both of them sleeping in shifts like they were back on deployment. The 12 gold bars sat in the hotel's safe, documented, photographed, their serial numbers cross-referenced against classified manifests Catherine pulled from databases Marcus wasn't supposed to know existed. On the second day, 2 men arrived in a black SUV with government plates, but no agency markings. They wore suits that fit too well and moved with the efficiency of operators, not bureaucrats. They examined the gold without speaking, verified the journal's contents, then loaded everything into metal cases that sealed with a hiss of pressurized locks. Confirmation will come through official channels, one of them told Catherine. 48 to 72 hours. Then they were gone, disappearing into the Montana morning like smoke. Catherine turned to Marcus. Now we wait. But waiting meant exposure. Meant staying in one place while people who wanted him dead triangulated his position. On the third night, Sable woke him with a low growl. Marcus was upright instantly, hand reaching for the gun on the nightstand. The dog stood at the window, hackles raised, staring down at the parking lot. Marcus moved to her side, staying in the shadows, peering through the curtain. A white panel van sat idling 3 spaces from Catherine's rental car. No plates. Windows tinted black. Engine running. Marcus's pulse kicked up. He grabbed his phone, texted Catherine, "We have company." Her response came instantly. "See it. Stay inside. I'm making a call." 5 minutes stretched like hours. The van didn't move, didn't shut off, just sat there, waiting. Then headlights swept across the parking lot. A Montana State Police cruiser pulled in, spotlight illuminating the van. The van's engine revved. Tires squealed as it reversed hard, then peeled out of the lot, disappearing down the highway. The trooper made a slow circuit of the parking lot, spotlight checking shadows, then drove away. Marcus's phone buzzed. Friends in useful places, Catherine had texted. But we're out of time. They know where we are. Morning brought better news. Catherine knocked on Marcus's door at 7 a.m., holding her phone like it was a winning lottery ticket. It's official, she said, voice tight with barely contained triumph. The Department of Defense has confirmed recovery of 12 gold bars matching the Saigon shipment. Finder's fee approved at 15% of documented recovery value. She showed him the email on her screen. $38.2 million, pending standard verification procedures. Marcus stared at the number, his mind refusing to process that many zeros attached to his name. Verification procedures? He asked carefully. Testimony. Paperwork. A deposition with DoD investigators. Standard procedure for this kind of recovery. Catherine's expression sobered. But there's a condition. Of course there was. The people who signed off on this deal want assurances. They want to know the rest of the gold is secure. That it won't surface on the black market in 6 months, creating an international incident. It's secure, Marcus said. They want coordinates. Exact location. Under seal, classified, accessible only to approved personnel. Marcus felt the trap closing. And if I refuse? The deal evaporates. The gold gets seized as evidence. You get nothing but a thank you and a bus ticket. Sable pressed against his leg, grounding him. Marcus thought about the barn, isolated and vulnerable. Thought about the men in the van, about Sentinel Solutions, about everyone who'd spent 40 years killing to keep this secret buried. Thought about 168 gold bars sitting under a floor that any competent search team could find in an hour. I need a guarantee, he said slowly. Not just finder's fee money. I need protection. Real protection. Witness security, new identity, relocation assistance. For me and Sable. Catherine nodded. Already part of the deal. You'll be placed in WITSEC within a week, relocated to wherever you choose under a new name. The Army will create a paper trail showing you died in a training accident. Marcus Reid disappears. Someone else takes his place. And my uncle's killers? I've got 6 names. 3 are already dead. The other 3. Catherine's smile was thin and sharp. One's a retired colonel living in Alexandria. One's a defense contractor in San Diego. One's a senator from Texas. With your testimony and the journal, I can connect them to at least 4 murders and a 40-year conspiracy to defraud the United States government. Will they go to jail? The colonel might. The contractor definitely. The senator. She shrugged. Politicians have ways of skating. But his career ends. His reputation ends. That's justice of a kind. Marcus walked to the window, staring out at mountains that had hidden secrets for generations. He thought about Uncle Robert, dying alone to protect a nephew he'd barely known. Thought about Sable, who'd given everything without asking for anything in return. Thought about the choice between right and wrong, between justice and survival, between the man he'd been and the man he was becoming. The gold is in the barn, he said quietly. Northwest corner of the loft. False floorboard with a brass lock. Keys in my duffel. Catherine exhaled slowly. Thank you. When do I testify? Tomorrow. DoD investigators are flying into Kalispell tonight. We'll do the deposition here, controlled environment, full security. She paused. After that, you're done. New life starts immediately. Marcus nodded, feeling the weight of finality settle over him. That night, he couldn't sleep. He sat in the darkness with Sable, running his fingers through her fur, listening to her breathe. We're going to be okay, he whispered. Finally, after everything, we're going to be okay. Sable's tail thumped softly against the carpet. At dawn, Marcus stood in front of the bathroom mirror, staring at a face that had aged a decade in 6 months. Hollow cheeks, dark circles under his eyes, scars visible and invisible. Marcus Reid, homeless veteran, Purple Heart recipient, sole inheritor of a secret that had killed better men than him. By tomorrow, that person would cease to exist. Someone new would take his place. Someone with money in the bank and no past chasing him. Someone who could finally stop running. The deposition room was deliberately sterile, a conference space in a Kalispell office building, rented under a shell company, swept for bugs twice before the investigators arrived. Catherine sat beside Marcus, a lawyer she'd brought in flanking his other side. Across the table, 3 DoD investigators in civilian clothes arranged recording equipment and stacks of documents. Sable lay at Marcus's feet, her presence the only thing keeping his PTSD from spiraling as he recounted everything. Finding the letter, the journey to Montana, opening the floor panel, the gold bars stamped with treasury marks, the journal detailing 40 years of murder and cover-up. The investigators asked their questions with the flat precision of people who'd heard worse. They cross-referenced serial numbers, compared his photos to classified manifests, verified dates and locations against Robert Callahan's military records. For hours later, the lead investigator, a woman in her 40s named Dr. Sandra Martinez, set down her pen. "That's everything we need for now," she said. "The journal and photographic evidence will be entered as classified exhibits. Your testimony will be sealed under national security protocols." "What happens next?" Marcus asked. Dr. Martinez exchanged glances with her colleagues. "The gold will be recovered by a military asset recovery team, transported to a secure facility. You'll receive your finder's fee within 30 days, transferred to an account established under your new identity." "And the investigation?" "Ongoing. We have jurisdiction over military personnel, past and present. The civilian contractors and the senator will be referred to appropriate authorities." She softened slightly. "I can't promise prison time, but I can promise consequences." It wasn't enough. Would never be enough for the lives lost. But it was something. Catherine walked Marcus back to the hotel afterward, both of them silent, exhausted. At his door, she stopped. "You did good," she said quietly. "Robert would be proud." Marcus nodded, too tired for words. "The WITSEC coordinators will contact you tomorrow morning. They'll walk you through the process, help you choose a location, establish your new identity." She handed him a business card. "If you ever need anything, ever, this number reaches me directly, no matter what name you're using." He took the card, sliding it into his wallet. "Thank you for believing me. Thank you for trusting me." She smiled. Not many people in your position would have. After she left, Marcus sat on the bed with Sable, the weight of everything finally crashing down. In 72 hours, his entire world had inverted. Homeless to millionaire. Hunted to protected. Marcus Reid to whoever he was about to become. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Asset recovery team deployed. ETA to Site 0600 tomorrow. Coordinates confirmed. All personnel cleared." It was happening. Right now, trucks were rolling toward that barn. Soldiers preparing to extract 168 gold bars from beneath floorboards his uncle had nailed down 40 years ago. Marcus pulled up the photos he'd taken, swiping through images of gold stacked in precise military rows. Fortune and tragedy compressed into 4 square feet of hidden space. Then he opened his banking app, the new account Catherine's people had established under his temporary alias. Current balance, $847. His disability payments and the last of his savings. In 30 days, that number would transform into something incomprehensible. He set the phone down, looked at Sable. "What do you think, girl? Where should we go?" The dog's tail wagged, her eyes bright despite exhaustion. "Somewhere warm," Marcus decided. "Somewhere you can run on a beach without hurting. Somewhere no one knows us and no one's looking." Sable barked once, agreement and trust. That night, Marcus dreamed of the barn for the last time. In the dream, Uncle Robert stood in the loft, younger than he'd been at death, smiling sadly as soldiers in modern gear carefully removed gold bars from the floor panel. "You did it," Robert said. "Survived long enough to make it matter." "I didn't do anything," Dream Marcus replied. "Just got lucky." Robert shook his head. "Luck is staying alive when better men die. You earned this. Now do something with it that honors what it cost." Marcus woke before dawn, those words echoing. By noon, the DoD team had confirmed successful recovery. 168 bars secured, transported under armed escort to an undisclosed facility. The barn would be dismantled within the week, the land sold to a conservation trust, erasing physical evidence that anything had ever been hidden there. By evening, a WITSEC coordinator named Agent Sarah Brennan sat in Marcus's hotel room, walking him through the process of becoming someone else. "You'll choose a new name," she explained. "New social security number, driver's license, Complete background documentation. We'll establish employment history, credit reports, everything needed for a functional identity. Can I keep Sable? Brennan smiled. Service dogs transfer with their handlers. She'll be registered under your new name, but she stays with you. Relief flooded through him. Where do you want to relocate? Brennan asked. Marcus had thought about this. Somewhere coastal. Quiet. Where a veteran with disability income and some savings wouldn't attract attention. Brennan pulled up a map on her tablet. We have protocols in several locations. North Carolina coast. Gulf shores of Florida. Oregon. California. North Carolina, Marcus said. Outer Banks. Brennan nodded, making notes. Good choice. Lower cost of living, veteran-friendly community, easy to blend in. She looked up. You'll have a fresh start, Mr. Reid. I recommend you use it wisely. 3 days later, Marcus and Sable boarded a plane under names that weren't theirs, but would be soon enough. The flight to Norfolk took 6 hours, and Marcus spent most of it staring out the window at clouds that looked like mountains, like Afghanistan, like every place he'd ever been that had tried to kill him. A rental car waited at the airport. The drive to Nag's Head took another 3 hours, Highway 64 cutting through salt marshes and pine forests before opening onto barrier islands wrapped in Atlantic fog. The house Witzek had arranged sat on a quiet street 6 blocks from the beach, a small 2-bedroom cottage with weathered shingles and a fenced yard. Nothing fancy, but solid, safe, his. Marcus parked in the driveway, Sable already alert and sniffing the new smells through the window. What do you think? He asked her. She barked, tail wagging. They'd made it. The next 30 days passed in a blur of paperwork, phone calls, and the surreal experience of watching numbers materialize in a bank account that bore a name he was still learning to answer to. Daniel Morrison, former Army specialist, medically retired, relocated to North Carolina for health reasons. That was his cover story, simple and boring and utterly forgettable. And on day 31, Marcus, now Daniel, checked his banking app and watched his balance update. $38,247,523.19. He stared at the number until the screen blurred. Read it 3 times to make sure it was real. Then he closed the app, set his phone down, and walked outside to where Sable lay in the sun, her gray muzzle resting on her paws, content in a way she hadn't been in years. Marcus sat beside her on the warm grass, running his hand along her back, feeling scars beneath her fur that matched his own. We did it, girl, he whispered. We actually did it. Sable's tail thumped softly. Marcus looked toward the ocean, visible between houses, endless and blue and forgiving. He thought about Uncle Robert, who'd spent 40 years protecting a secret that had finally found its purpose. Thought about the men who'd died to keep it buried. Thought about justice, incomplete but present, powerful men finally facing consequences decades overdue. And he thought about the future, stretching out before him like that ocean, vast, unknowable, full of possibility. Catherine pulled a folder from her bag, setting it on the coffee table between them. 2 months ago, we arrested Senator Mitchell Carver, the one from Texas, the one whose name was in Robert's journal. Daniel nodded slowly. He'd followed the news, watched the spectacle of a powerful man finally facing consequences. His lawyers cut a deal, Catherine continued. Full cooperation in exchange for reduced charges. And 3 weeks ago, Carver's testimony led us to something we didn't know existed. She opened the folder, revealing photographs of a concrete bunker built into a hillside, its entrance hidden by decades of forest growth. Where is this? Daniel asked. Montana, 40 miles from your uncle's barn, on federal land that was surveyed for a highway extension in 1971, then quietly abandoned. Catherine pulled out another photo. The bunker's interior, shelves lined with metal cases. Robert Callahan didn't just hide gold in that barn, Daniel. He had evidence. Documents, photographs, recordings. Everything needed to prove what really happened in Saigon. Daniel's pulse quickened. Why hide it separately? Insurance. If someone found the gold, they wouldn't find the evidence. If someone found the evidence, they wouldn't know about the gold. Catherine met his eyes. Your uncle was protecting the truth, not just the treasure. What's in those cases? Classified documents showing the gold shipment was approved at the highest levels. Photographs of officers loading it onto transport planes. Audio recordings of conversations between Pentagon officials discussing the diversion. She paused. and a list. 23 names. Officers, contractors, politicians, everyone who knew about the theft and helped cover it up. Daniel absorbed this, his mind racing. How many are still alive? 14, including 2 sitting congressmen, a retired 4-star general, and the former Secretary of Defense. Jesus. This is bigger than we thought, Daniel. This isn't just about gold stolen during wartime. This is about a 40-year conspiracy that reaches the highest levels of government. Catherine leaned forward. And Senator Carver's testimony just gave us probable cause to open everything. What do you need from me? Permission. The bunker is on federal land, but the contents were placed there by Robert Callahan, which makes them part of his estate. Which makes you the legal owner. She slid a document across the table. Sign this, and we can recover the evidence. Use it to prosecute everyone on that list. Daniel stared at the paper, his hand hovering over the pen Catherine offered. What happens to the people whose names are on that list? He asked quietly. The ones we can prove committed crimes? Prosecution. The ones who just knew and stayed silent. Catherine's expression hardened. Public exposure. Congressional hearings. The kind of scrutiny that destroys reputations and ends legacies. Will anyone actually go to prison? Some will. The others. She shrugged. They'll spend the rest of their lives explaining why they let good people die to protect a secret. Daniel thought about Uncle Robert, alone and afraid, watching his friends die one by one. Thought about the journal entries written in shaking handwriting, documenting murders that no one investigated because the victims had already been erased from official records. Thought about justice, incomplete but persistent. He signed the document. Catherine exhaled slowly. Thank you. When do you recover it? Team deploys tomorrow. We'll have everything cataloged within a week. She stood, tucking the folder away. This is going to get loud, Daniel. Media attention, congressional investigations, documentary crews. Everyone's going to want to know how we found it. And your name stays sealed. WITSEC protocols hold. As far as anyone knows, an anonymous tip led us to the bunker. Robert Callahan's nephew was never found, presumed deceased. She met his eyes. You stay ghost. You stay safe. Relief washed through him. Thank you. At the door, Catherine paused. One more thing. The finder's fee for the gold? That was 15% of documented recovery. 12 bars. I remember. The bunker recovery opens up the full audit. All 168 bars accounted for, officially on the books. Her smile was faint. Which means you're entitled to 15% of the complete recovery. Not just what you turned over. Daniel's breath caught. That's roughly 38 million more. Give or take. Catherine's smile widened. Paperwork should process within 6 months. Congratulations, Daniel. You just became one of the wealthiest veterans in America. She left him standing in the doorway, Sable pressed against his leg, both of them staring at the future that had just reshaped itself again. The recovery made national news 3 weeks later. Montana bunker yields evidence of massive Vietnam era corruption scandal read the headlines. News crews descended on the remote hillside, filming the concrete structure that had held secrets for half a century. Talking heads debated on cable news. Congressional committees announced investigations. And slowly, methodically, Catherine Wells and her team began dismantling the conspiracy that had lasted longer than most of the people involved. 2 congressmen resigned before indictments could be filed. The retired general died of a heart attack the day FBI agents arrived at his door. The former Secretary of Defense hired the most expensive legal team in Washington and prepared for a battle he couldn't win. Daniel watched it all from his deck in North Carolina, Sable sleeping at his feet, the Atlantic stretching endlessly before them. On a cool spring morning 6 months after Catherine's visit, Daniel's phone buzzed with a text. Second payment processed. Check your account. He opened the banking app with hands that barely trembled anymore. Current balance, $76,521,847.33. $76 million. He set the phone down, looked at Sable. Well, girl, what do we do with that? The dog's tail thumped once. Daniel had already decided. Over the next year, the Daniel Morrison Foundation quietly opened offices in 12 cities across America. Its mission was simple: providing housing, medical care, and transition support for homeless veterans and their service animals. The foundation bought apartment buildings in cities with large veteran populations, converting them to transitional housing where veterans could stay rent-free for up to 2 years while they rebuilt their lives. Medical clinics staffed with PTSD specialists opened in partnership with VA hospitals. Legal aid offices helped veterans navigate the bureaucratic maze of disability claims and benefits. And in every city, a companion program offered free veterinary care, training support, and adoption services for military working dogs aging out of service. Daniel ran it all from his house in Nag's Head, video conferencing with staff, reviewing proposals, signing checks that still felt surreal even after a year of practice. He never appeared in photographs, never gave interviews, never attended the ribbon-cutting ceremonies when new facilities opened. The foundation's founder remained anonymous, officially, a group of wealthy donors who preferred privacy. But the veterans who benefited knew something the media didn't. Someone who'd walked their path was watching over them. Catherine pulled a folder from her bag, setting it on the coffee table between them. 2 months ago, we arrested Senator Mitchell Carver, the one from Texas, the one whose name was in Robert's journal. Daniel nodded slowly. He'd followed the news, watched the spectacle of a powerful man finally facing consequences. His lawyers cut a deal, Catherine continued. Full cooperation in exchange for reduced charges. And 3 weeks ago, Carver's testimony led us to something we didn't know existed. She opened the folder, revealing photographs of a concrete bunker built into a hillside, its entrance hidden by decades of forest growth. Where is this? Daniel asked. Montana, 40 miles from your uncle's barn, on federal land that was surveyed for a highway extension in 1971, then quietly abandoned. Catherine pulled out another photo, the bunker's interior, shelves lined with metal cases. Robert Callahan didn't just hide gold in that barn, Daniel. He had evidence. Documents, photographs, recordings. Everything needed to prove what really happened in Saigon. Daniel's pulse quickened. Why hide it separately? Insurance. If someone found the gold, they wouldn't find the evidence. If someone found the evidence, they wouldn't know about the gold. Catherine met his eyes. Your uncle was protecting the truth, not just the treasure. What's in those cases? Classified documents showing the gold shipment was approved at the highest levels. Photographs of officers loading it onto transport planes. Audio recordings of conversations between Pentagon officials discussing the diversion. She paused. And a list. 23 names. Officers, contractors, politicians, everyone who knew about the theft and helped cover it up. Daniel absorbed this, his mind racing. How many are still alive? 14, including 2 sitting congressmen, a retired 4-star general, and the former Secretary of Defense. Jesus. This is bigger than we thought, Daniel. This isn't just about gold stolen during wartime. This is about a 40-year conspiracy that reaches the highest levels of government. Catherine leaned forward. And Senator Carver's testimony just gave us probable cause to open everything. What do you need from me? Permission. The bunker is on federal land, but the contents were placed there by Robert Callahan, which makes them part of his estate, which makes you the legal owner. She slid a document across the table. Sign this, and we can recover the evidence. Use it to prosecute everyone on that list. Daniel stared at the paper, his hand hovering over the pen Catherine offered. What happens to the people whose names are on that list? He asked quietly. The ones we can prove committed crimes? Prosecution. The ones who just knew and stayed silent. Catherine's expression hardened. Public exposure. Congressional hearings. The kind of scrutiny that destroys reputations and ends legacies. Will anyone actually go to prison? Some will. The others. She shrugged. They'll spend the rest of their lives explaining why they let good people die to protect a secret. Daniel thought about Uncle Robert, alone and afraid, watching his friends die one by one. Thought about the journal entries written in shaking handwriting, documenting murders that no one investigated because the victims had already been erased from official records. Thought about justice, incomplete but persistent. He signed the document. Catherine exhaled slowly. Thank you. When do you recover it? Team deploys tomorrow. We'll have everything cataloged within a week. She stood, tucking the folder away. This is going to get loud, Daniel. Media attention, congressional investigations, documentary crews. Everyone's going to want to know how we found it. And your name stays sealed. WITSEC protocols hold. As far as anyone knows, an anonymous tip led us to the bunker. Robert Callahan's nephew was never found, presumed deceased. She met his eyes. You stay, Ghost. You stay safe. Relief washed through him. Thank you. At the door, Catherine paused. One more thing. The finder's fee for the gold? That was 15% of documented recovery. 12 bars. I remember. The bunker recovery opens up the full audit. All 168 bars accounted for, officially on the books. Her smile was faint. Which means you're entitled to 15% of the complete recovery. Not just what you turned over. Daniel's breath caught. That's roughly 38 million more. Give or take. Catherine's smile widened. Paperwork should process within 6 months. Congratulations, Daniel. You just became one of the wealthiest veterans in America. She left him standing in the doorway, Sable pressed against his leg, both of them staring at the future that had just reshaped itself again. The recovery made national news 3 weeks later. Montana bunker yields evidence of massive Vietnam era corruption scandal read the headlines. News crews descended on the remote hillside, filming the concrete structure that had held secrets for half a century. Talking heads debated on cable news. Congressional committees announced investigations. And slowly, methodically, Catherine Wells and her team began dismantling the conspiracy that had lasted longer than most of the people involved. 2 congressmen resigned before indictments could be filed. The retired general died of a heart attack the day FBI agents arrived at his door. The former Secretary of Defense hired the most expensive legal team in Washington and prepared for a battle he couldn't win. Daniel watched it all from his deck in North Carolina, Sable sleeping at his feet, the Atlantic stretching endlessly before them. On a cool spring morning 6 months after Catherine's visit, Daniel's phone buzzed with a text. Second payment processed. Check your account. He opened the banking app with hands that barely trembled anymore. Current balance, $76,521,847.33. $76 million. He set the phone down, looked at Sable. Well, girl, what do we do with that? The dog's tail thumped once. Daniel had already decided. Over the next year, the Daniel Morrison Foundation quietly opened offices in 12 cities across America. Its mission was simple: providing housing, medical care, and transition support for homeless veterans and their service animals. The foundation bought apartment buildings in cities with large veteran populations, converting them to transitional housing where veterans could stay rent-free for up to 2 years while they rebuilt their lives. Medical clinics staffed with PTSD specialists opened in partnership with VA hospitals. Legal aid offices helped veterans navigate the bureaucratic maze of disability claims and benefits. And in every city, a companion program offered free veterinary care, training support, and adoption services for military working dogs aging out of service. Daniel ran it all from his house in Nag's Head, video conferencing with staff, reviewing proposals, signing checks that still felt surreal even after a year of practice. He never appeared in photographs, never gave interviews, never attended the ribbon-cutting ceremonies when new facilities opened. The foundation's founder remained anonymous, officially, a group of wealthy donors who preferred privacy. But the veterans who benefited knew something the media didn't. Someone who'd walked their path was watching over them.